Story 1 by Reddit user Mr. Grumpy 252. So this happened when I was about 2 years old, around 1977. My grandma's cabin was out in the Cascade foothills in eastern Washington state, near the town of Twisp. It was winter, with temps well below freezing and around 2 to 3 feet of frozen snow on the ground. My grandfather had gone hunting recently, and the overflow that did not fit in the freezer was stored outside on the enclosed back porch under some galvanized steel watering troughs that were upside down to protect them. Granny heard a loud crash like one of the troughs had been thrown over. Grandpa hit the porch light, and a huge crash shook the house. He grabbed a gun and ran outside thinking it might be a bear or something. The trough was in the yard. That was the first noise Granny heard. The second noise and the house shaking turned out to be a 4x4-inch porch support pillar that got snapped in half like a twig when whatever it was ran straight through it. There were bare, human-shaped footprints 18 inches long leading away into the dark. My dad had my mum, sister and myself there by 8 a.m. the next morning, a 5 to 6 hour drive in the winter. This story has been told to me at various times of my life by my mum, dad, and grandmother, all at different times. It's always the same. My dad and grandpa followed the tracks to the river where they lost it because it travelled in the shallow water so as not to be tracked. The trail was littered with the wrapping paper my grandma had wrapped the meat in. It was not torn open as would be expected, but apparently looked as if it had been carefully unwrapped. The dogs, one of which was half shepherd, half coyote, were too scared to pursue. My grandmother always mentioned the awful smell as well, that lingered around the porch area for a short while after. According to my dad, this thing was big and heavy. The footprints were sunk so deep in the frozen snow that he could not even match the depth by jumping from the porch roof. Some federal agency or investigators took the hair samples that were left on the 4x4, and I've been told that the test results showed no known animal. Keep in mind that this was the late 70s, so not real high tech. I have seen the plaster cast of the footprints with my own eyes. They have always struck me as the most authentic I have seen, not because it was my family's story, but because of one of the toes. One big toe on one foot. It sticks out at a funny angle, like it was broken and not set correctly before it healed. That just seems hard and pointless to fake, just to fool a couple living out in the woods. Especially in 1977, in Washington, right? What do you all think of Granny's encounter with this something? She has always been convinced it was Sasquatch. Before I continue to the next story, I just want to say thank you for choosing to watch this video, and I hope you enjoy my narration. If you are, please show your appreciation by liking this video, commenting on it, and if you don't already, subscribing to my channel. Story 2 by Reddit user Slow-Fault. Okay, this is probably going to be a crap post because I'm on my mobile and I've had a long hard day on a road getting out of the Ozarks, being stuck on a side road towing a 20k load on a holiday weekend. Sorry if I butcher grammar or anything else I do annoying. Rough weekend, but I want to make sure I document this while it's fresh in my mind. Okay, so I'm an owner and operator, travelling industrial electrician. I also feel for relevance to this story I should mention I am a woman. My job takes me everywhere, so being somewhere in the middle of nowhere with strange sounds and critters kind of comes with the territory. So does the poor bathroom accommodations. So a couple of weeks ago, we jumped on a job with a quick turnaround, 4 weeks. That's something new to me. A plant that breaks down and processes quality-grade meats. This is the stuff that goes into dog food and potted meat and all that wonderful stuff. This is in the uppermost corner of northwest Arkansas, north of Fayetteville. It stinks so bad in this place, and it's still running while I'm there to do the electrical on one of 4 new process lines. Now this is a large addition, basically a new wing of the building. They do not have a sufficient number of portalets, and the one they do have they claim hasn't been cleaned in a while, because the crane is in the way. And despite the fact that the site has the equipment to move the toilets so they won't be blocked, that doesn't mean they are doing it. So, I make a deal with the boss that I will be using the bathroom, for a number 2, at the country store about 7 miles from the site. I noticed the chemical building was set a good distance behind the plant. Very typical placement. Behind it, they had a slab with a condenser, then a patch of grass on a downslope that led to a 4-foot chain-link fence I could walk around, and access a patch of woods with about 4 to 5 foot of gentle slope, before a steep drop-off of about 40 and 20 feet after the flat ground, there was a lovely creek. Perfect place to pee. So, for the first week I was in a walk-in ceiling above the boiler room and peed in a bottle mostly. I did go to the wood patch a couple of times to pee, but everything was normal. The first time it got strange was the second week. I crossed the fence to pee on the gentle slope patch before the drop-off, and something just came over me not to let my arse face the drop-off. I don't know, it was weird, like the sensation of being watched. I stood there and scoped it out to see if maybe another plant worker was there to take a leak, but there was not. Odd. Whatever. Back to work. I came out later that day to pee, and still, I felt I wasn't alone. The feeling of being watched continued, and I just kind of did my business, facing my ass away from the woods, and went back to work. Sometime in the 3rd week, it was early in the morning and I was peeing in my spot in the woods, and suddenly, something let loose. It was the unmistakable sound of a large, heavy body falling down the incline. I heard the leaves crunching, the tumbling sound rolling down the hill. I jumped up in midstream, scrambling to pull my pants up. I spun around in the direction of the noise to see what it was. It took me a second of scanning, and the only thing I could see that didn't look normal was a large lump at the bottom of the incline near a large rock. I stood for a moment, observing, thinking it was possibly a bear. This thing was perfectly still, and no matter how long I looked at it, I couldn't make out a discernible shape. It also didn't move, like I was convinced whatever it was wasn't breathing, because of how still it was. I shrugged it off and went back to work. I spent the next couple of days walking the distance to the field I parked my truck at to pee. I just was not in the mood to go back to those woods. Eventually, I broke down and went back to peeing in the woods. I ignored the feeling of being watched, faced out into the woods down the slope, and put pep in my step getting out of there. I repeated this for a couple of days until one evening, late in the day, I went to pee about this time. As soon as I rounded the corner of the chemical building, this wave just washed over me. It was like when I rounded that corner, every instinctual alarm was telling me to get the F out of there, right now. Of course, as a stupid human, I ignored this instinctual warning and still went to pee. For some reason, I refused to face the downslope this time. There was like a voice in my head assuring me, "Don't look back." Thankfully, I finished peeing with no incident. Then my phone rings, which legit startled the shit out of me. It was my husband looking for me. We work together. I tell him to hang on because I hear the noise of something splashing loudly in the creek. I turn around, and to this day I still cannot explain what I saw. It just doesn't remotely resemble anything of this world. I'm going to do my best to describe it. Okay, you know those Muppets on Sesame Street, whose appendages would stretch out and come back in? Imagine one of those, but all black, Vanta black, but very fuzzy looking, just like the Muppets on Sesame Street. It ran in a bipedal fashion, but its legs would slink out and get long as it stepped. Imagine something black and fuzzy with two flailing fuzzy slinkies for legs, running with matching arms flailing in a similar manner. In its motion, its skinny fuzzy body and neck kinda expanded and wobbled up and down. It was just running west and cut across the creek, and without breaking stride ran up on the bank. I was kind of in awe for a moment. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. Finally, I frantically muttered to my husband, "It's wrong. Something is really wrong. I need you." I dropped my phone where I was standing and ran back to the unit. I ended up running into my husband when I got up the stairs from the boiler room. I must have looked pretty bad because he grabbed me, shaking me a little, demanding to know what was wrong. I couldn't really explain it to him what I saw at the time. All I could get out was the black thing in the woods. My husband insisted I show him, so I took him round the back of the chemical building to where I saw it. The atmosphere wasn't the same. It was much lighter, nothing like before. My husband looked around and saw my phone on the ground. He went down and got it and looked down the drop-off. Nothing. My husband looked at the phone, gave me a strange look and handed it to me. He asked me again that night what happened, but when I made efforts to describe what I saw, he seemed to get frustrated. He kept trying to compare it to known animals like a monkey, a bear, a dog, but I told him it wasn't even close. I never went to pee there again, and the rest of the time I was on the job. Can anyone tell me what I could have possibly seen was? Like, seriously, what was it? What the hell was that thing? Story 3. By Reddit user GoofTrooper72. This experience happened a few years back. Either 7 or 8 years to be exact. And I still don't know what to think of it. I live in northern Wyoming. No, we don't ride horses wherever we are going. Even though I have seen people do it. But I'm getting off topic. My mum and her boyfriend at the time were dating. They'd been together for a while, so it felt right to consider him family as well. They were talking about going to the cabin, or bringing the trailer and going to camp. I didn't mind either because there was so much to do, specifically having the imagination of a child back then. They decided the cabin, and I proceeded to ask if I could bring a friend. They finally said yes to it, and thank goodness they did too. Who else would have believed what we saw? We picked my friend up. His name is going to be Greg for privacy reasons, and we started on our way up the mountains. Greg and I were talking about what we will do up there and about having fun for an entire weekend. As soon as we got there, it was around noon. My mum made sandwiches for lunch and kicked us out for the rest of the day. As we were outside trying to find something fun to do, we proceeded to grab sticks and pretend we were in some sort of Call of Duty game. As it started to get colder and the sun was about to set, I showed Greg where the treehouse was. The treehouse was just a platform with a 2x4 holding it up. 3 trees on each corner, with an opening where a makeshift ladder was. As we were sitting there, we were just talking about school and the things that were going on there. All of a sudden, Greg stopped talking. I felt an odd feeling fill my body. I looked where Greg was looking at. I saw a creature that stood 8 to 9 feet tall. The afternoon sun hit just right to show all the fur over its body, except the face area, as it was poking its head back behind and around the tree. I looked at Greg. "Hey, what a..." I started to say as he gets up and jumps off the treehouse. I sit there and look at the creature that moved to a different tree closer to me. Fear hits my body and my eyes started to water as I watch this thing peering right back. As I'm looking at it, I swear I see another one about 20 yards away from the first one. I didn't want to be here anymore, so I decided to keep looking at it and scoot my butt over to the edge. As I see the other one running to another tree, I jump, pick myself up, and sprint towards where Greg sprinted off to. As I run, I hear him, "Run! It's behind you!" I try to run faster and I hear loud thumps behind me. I get in front of the cabin to the clearing of the woods. I'm breathing heavy, same as Greg. We looked back and see two silhouettes stare right back at us. I don't know if they were curious or what. I'm glad we didn't find out. Story 4 by Reddit user xpropaganda4x, who also goes by Brian. I had an experience in June of 2004. I never thought about it again until a few years ago when I came across my journal entry from that time. Once I read it, everything came flooding back, and has become the foundation for my personal belief in Bigfoot. To help you understand why I feel so strongly about their existence, I need to explain why I was in the middle of the wilderness to begin with. I grew up in an affluent part of southern Orange County, California, and began abusing drugs pretty early on. Too much time plus too much money equals bad habits. So I was what you would consider a troubled teen. Right after I turned 17 in April of 2004, I got sent to a wilderness rehabilitation program called Aspen Achievement Academy, based out of Lower Utah, about 3 to 4 hours south of Salt Lake City. After I changed clothes and received gear, I was transported by van to this big open area off a long dirt road, and then someone walked me another half an hour to meet my group. I don't know many specifics about where we camped or where we hiked throughout the entirety of the program, as they never really told us much at all. We didn't have contact with anyone other than our group leaders and a therapist that would come periodically. I was in this program, in the middle of wilderness, always at least 2.5 to 3 hours, and many miles away from civilization, for 52 days. We would hike from water source to water source, and we were resupplied every 8 days when the staff changed over. I was in the wilderness for the total of my 52 days in the program. I do know 2 locations we hiked to. A place called Ledge Lake that was on the edge of a huge cliff, probably 300 to 400 feet above the forest floor below, looking south. And I also know we hiked and camped at a place called Miller Creek Cove. So, all I know was that we were somewhere in the southern Utah wilderness, most of, if not, the entire time. Oh, and also, we had to write a 1-page journal every entry day before dinner, and it is this journal I found more recently that reminded me of the incident. On June 11th, 2004, day 35 of my program, we had a 10-mile hike plan to reach the next water source. We never hiked longer than 1 full day without making it to a place where we could fill our Nalgene bottles. We only carried what we needed. We were literally in the middle of the wilderness and could not physically carry non-essential items, even if we wanted to. During this particular hike, one of the other kids named Robbie hurt his knee really bad traversing the side of this mountain. So we had to change course and basically bushwhack straight down the mountain from where we were to find a clearing where we could set up camp. Everyone divvied up Robbie's and 2 of the other guys' gear, so they could carry him down. When the ground leveled out to the bottom, we came to a trail. Think less hiking trail and more game animal trail. The trail came to a T, and where we came down was basically at the top of the T. We hung our food bags 25 to 30 yards to the right, and we made camp about 50 yards further down the trail, at the bottom of the T-path, on both sides of the trail. The forest was really dense. You could never really see further than about 25 to 30 yards because of how many trees there were. But there was enough of a clearing along this path that all 12 of us could spread out on either side of the trail and make a shelter out of our tarp and cord. When we woke up the next morning, I wrote in my journal later that day on July 12, 2004, there were these crazy big footprints going through the site, and hair was found high up in a tree about shoulder height. I remember, specifically, the footprints were at least the length of my elbow to the tips of my fingers. I was fully grown at 6 foot when I was 17, so looking at my arm now, it would have had to have been about 18 inches long and maybe 6 inches wide. I don't remember it looking any different than the shape of a normal human foot. Just freaking gigantic. Knowing what I know now, I would have documented the crap out of it and measured every toe and ridge and everything. I remember the gate was large enough that I felt like I was halfway doing the splits to reach each one, and we were all laughing about it. Another thing I remember was how hard-packed the trail was, and that none of us, including the staff, 200-pound-plus dudes, could make an impression in the dirt even remotely close to as deep as these giant footprints were. They were deep enough that the ground looked like it was soft when the footprint was made, and then it dried completely hard as a rock in the morning by the time we found them. But it didn't rain at all that night before, and they weren't there when we got there the afternoon before. The footsteps went from the bottom of the T and then made a right toward the hanging food bags. Another 15 feet or so past the food bags, one of our counselors reached up and grabbed a tuft of hair that was stuck to a branch on the left side. My journal entry says it was shoulder height, but I remember him physically reaching up to grab it. I can't explain this discrepancy other than I either wrote it wrong then or I am remembering it wrong now. In hindsight, I wish I would have smelled the hair and kept some of it. Anything more than having 15 minutes of, wow, that's weird, and then moving on and forgetting about it. I remember the hair was a light orange-brown but with lots of grey in it, like an aging ginger's beard. I remember it was much more coarse and wiry than anything I had ever seen in my life. I wish I would have freaking smelled it just to have another sensory memory of the whole thing. That quote I put in the paragraph above is the only thing in the journal entry about it. I'm sure I had heard of Bigfoot before this happened, but I wasn't into any of that sort of stuff. Cryptozoology, conspiracies, etc. UFOs I've been into since childhood from watching the X-Files in the early 90s, until my mid-20s, so it is reasonable to me that I only wrote that one sentence about how crazy it was, and then left it at that. Another strange thing from that morning that may be unrelated but is also crazy is that there was a large tree in the clearing where we set up camp. And while we were looking at the footprints, another kid noticed these super deep claw marks going up the trunk. At the time, we thought maybe a mountain lion or something similar was up the tree, stalking us overnight because we were in their territory or something. The claw marks were narrow, maybe half an inch wide, and at the deepest point maybe 1.5 inches or 2 deep, and they were still fresh with the green of the aspen tree underneath. I like to think that whatever it was scrambled up the tree when Bigfoot came walking through our camp, and maybe Bigfoot even saved one of us from being eaten or attacked that night. That's just me letting my imagination run with it though. I don't even know if these two things are related whatsoever. They just both happened around the same time, and it's cool to think about. One last thing. I remember one of the counselors, Shane, maybe Sean, said he had a friend that was some kind of scientist and did something with wild animals. But I don't know in what capacity or anything more than he was going to take the hair we found over to him to have a look at it. The next week when Sean came back, 8 days on, 6 days off scheduled for counselors, all he said was that he gave it to his said friend, and the friend stated he had never seen anything like it and would get back to him. Nothing more, nothing less. I never asked for any follow-up beyond that, and none of it ever entered my brain again, until I found my journal and read through it, coming across this entry below. July 12th, 2004. Journal entry 35. Day 36. Today, we woke up real early and had to divide up of all of Robert's things amongst the group. After taking some of his group's food, I made my pack, and then added his little tarp. We then hiked all the way to the closest water source, which was not too far away. But because the pack felt excruciatingly heavy, the hike felt really long. Before we left, we had a coyote transition for the new kid named William. He has a cool accent, but I don't know anything about him because he hasn't had an intro to the group yet. There was also these crazy big footprints going through the site, and hair was found high up in a tree about shoulder height. Once we got to the water source, we had breakfast and sat around for a really long time. Story 5. This story was submitted to me directly by Ashlyn Collins. Hi, I'm 16 years old, and I encountered Bigfoot just a few weeks ago. My grandma has a very large interest in Bigfoot and camps on Mount St. Helens every summer. She believes them as friends and even talks to them, though they have never let her see them. I have been camping with her since I was 14. This experience led me to believe that Bigfoot was indeed real. We recently moved to Kentucky in the summer of 2019. I know that many Bigfoot encounters have come from Kentucky, but I never experienced one until there just 3 weeks ago, when I took my 14-year-old sister into the woods with me hunting. I hunt squirrels and rabbits with a recurve bow, and I also use it for my protection. We went to the deer feeder we had set up during the summer in search of some sign of deer. We began to hear small, slow steps, as if something, or someone, was trying to sneak up on us. I loaded an arrow into my bow in case something were to attack us. At first, we thought it may have been a cougar or a bobcat. We headed toward the waterfall to check for signs of animal tracks in the mud. Then, a piece of rotten log was thrown next to us. We were confused because when we looked above us, there were no squirrels or birds, not even a rotten tree nearby. We get closer to the waterfall, and it happens again. We think nothing of it until a large rock the size of a basketball was thrown next to us. Then, I start to feel concerned. We think it is our brothers trying to trick us, but there's no way they can be so quiet in the crisp fallen leaves on the forest floor. Another large rock was thrown at us and it slid down the hill and off the ledge where the waterfall was. Thinking it could have been someone trying to hurt us, I head around the ledge and sneak around the corner, with an arrow loaded still, letting my sister stay in case something were to happen. When I come to the site of the waterfall, I see nothing. I let my sister know she can come over. To my surprise, we see nothing. Not even the rock that had just slid off the edge. Then I search for leaves, wet from the creek right beside them. I see an indent in the ground, like a large human footprint. My sister mentions that it is probably Bigfoot, and my heart leaps a little bit. A week before, just next to the waterfall, I had seen a buck with a broken leg. I heard stories of Bigfoot breaking the legs of animals so they can come and get them later. Now I believe this was Bigfoot throwing stuff at us. Both me and my sister took the hint. Bigfoot wants us to go away. So we started to head back, and 2 more pieces of rotten log were thrown at us. We get up the hill a little bit, and I turn to talk to my sister about how crazy this was for us. A stick whizzes past her head, as if Bigfoot was saying, "Keep moving." So, we head home and tell our family about it. We called our grandma, and she confirmed that it must have been Bigfoot. Thank you for watching and/or listening to this video. Again, if you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit the like button, and if you don't already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and select the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future uploads. Also, please leave a comment on this video letting me know what you thought of it. Comments really help with the YouTube algorithm and will really help my channel to grow. If you have a story you would like me to narrate, please email it to me at stories@daredeverell.com. A link is included in the video description. I'm getting close to my next major milestone of 100,000 subscribers to this channel. I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who is continuing to subscribe to this channel and contributing to its growth by liking videos and leaving comments. Once I get to 100,000 subscribers, my plan is to reward you all with an epic video with over 3 hours of original content. I'm thinking it'll be 3 hours of Wendigo or cryptid stories. If that is the sort of thing you want to hear, please keep helping this channel to grow. If you want to support my channel even further, there are a number of ways you can do so. You can consider leaving me a tip for this video via my PayPal. Link is included in the description. Check out my Teespring store and consider purchasing one of my shirt designs. I have a new design with a dogman, a Wendigo, a skinwalker and a Bigfoot, all on a zebra crossing. It's a must for anyone who likes these types of stories. Sometimes I get asked if I have done any audiobooks, and the answer to that is yes. On Audible there is a book Punch by J.R. Park that I narrated. I do get a small royalty if you decide to purchase that. It's a revenge/a horror novel that was a lot of fun to narrate. I'd love to do some more in the future at some point. If this channel takes off as much as I hope it will, it'll afford me more time in the future to be able to work on such projects. Thank you all again for watching.